Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Franchise Show. I hope you're doing well. This is the show, and I'm going to do it where we get under the hat of all things franchising. And it's live. Well, it's live if it's August 19th at 5:15 in the UK and 12:15 in bits of America. And if you're here live with us, then pop in a comment, say hello, because I always say this, that you're the producers and the directors of this show. So I have this written down at the beginning. Can you see that? Nothing at all. And that's because our conversations go the way that you want them to do. Now, each week on the Franchise Show, we take a different topic and we take a lovely guest. Today, we have two lovely guests. And today, the topic, and it's a controversial one, and it's franchise conflicts. Now, it's a subject that I've wanted to do because it's a very important subject, and how we deal with conflict and how we create a positive outcome for other franchisees, for our franchise network, for franchising in general is very important. So that's the topic today, and the fantastic guests we have to talk about that. We'll start with the lovely Nikki Senior. Nikki, welcome back to the Franchise Show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Of course, one of our lovely supporters from the bridge with Tim Morris. And we have Liam Hobbs from More Than Loft Ladders. Liam, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Thank you. Yeah, good to be here.
Oh, it's fantastic to have you here. And is Larry here? Is he going to make an appearance? He's behind you, isn't he? It's gone very pants. Oh, well, there he is.
There he is.
Excellent. Hi, Larry. Fantastic stuff. So the topic that we're going to be talking about is franchise conflicts. But before we get into that, I think it's going to be a good idea, because some of you have been here each week and you know the format and you know our show and you know our lovely people. But there are going to be some new people both now and in the future. So we're going to start with a couple of introductions, and it's going to be ladies first, of course. So Nikki, perhaps you could do a nice introduction to yourself, how you got into the world of franchising for our lovely audience.
Of course, for those of you who I have never spoken to, my name's Nikki, as you can see, and I'm the co-founder of Franchise HQ. I started off in franchising in 2018, just weirdly fell into it, as I think a lot of people do. I actually took on somebody else's brand and franchised it as my own business. So I ran and owned the brand. I did that for 5 years, sold the business, and went into coaching and mindset within the franchising space. And that's when I met the lovely Tim Morris, and we set up Franchise HQ earlier this year. So that's me.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And talking of Tim Morris, there he is. And he's put good evening, everyone. Great to be here as usual. It's great to have you with us, Tim. But before we get into and welcome all the people that are with us today, Liam, perhaps you could do the same. I mean, again, lots of people are going to know you, Liam, and what you've done and what you're doing, but it would be great to have an introduction from yourself as well.
Yeah, so I got into franchising in 2013. Was looking for, the sort of next step in my working life. Franchising appealed to me. Saw More Than Loft Ladders and just sort of loved the concept of it. So I started as a franchisee with More Than Loft Ladders, back in 2013. Grew my business, and eventually, for some crazy reason, I had a conversation with the then franchisor and said, "Do you want to sell it?" And he said yes, and I thought, "Oh shit, I've got to do it now." And I've had it since October 2022. And if I'm honest, I probably didn't know the full extent of franchising and what franchising is until then, even though I'd been in it for 9 years. Certainly opened up, a lot of things opened up and jumped out and said, this is what it's really all about.
That's a great position to be in. I'm still in that position. I do this every week from a point of learning and a point of listening. And I'm always surrounded by people who know more about franchising than I do. But it's a fantastic industry full of fantastic people who want to share and want to try and make franchising fantastic and as good as it can be. But great introduction from both of you. Thank you for that. Before we get into today's topic, let's welcome a few people who have joined us live already. We have the lovely Simon Wise. He's put, hello, franchise friends. No conflicts here, just love. Oh, that's beautiful. So beautiful, Simon. Thank you. That's it. That's good. We've already said hello to Tim, but let's say a double hello to Tim. He's put, good evening, everyone. Great to be here as usual. We have the lovely Johnny Joseph when his comment comes up. And he's from Los Angeles, and he's put, hi, fellow franchise family folks. That's difficult for me to say.
Tongue twister.
Yeah, it is. It's just as well I haven't been drinking. From a far away, too hot Los Angeles. It's always hot in Los Angeles. It's not as good as always sunny in Philadelphia. I don't know if they make a television program. It's always hot, too hot in Los Angeles, but they may do. They may do. But it's always great to have you here, Johnny. Johnny is, of course, a franchise auditor. So I imagine he deals with a little bit of conflict in his world. So it's going to be great to hear your take, Johnny, on conflict and where it sits in the world of auditing. We have a LinkedIn user here. Hi, everyone. Well, hi to you. Let us know who you are. And it would be great to welcome you to the show. We've got the fantastic Deborah Salisbury here from the Reading Doctor, and she's put hi. Well, hi to you too, Deborah. We have Leslie Flowers, former guest on the show, a great friend of mine from America, taught me some huge lessons and has a LinkedIn Live every Friday about the book Think and Grow Rich. So definitely check Leslie out. And she's put, hello, franchise friends. And finally, let's welcome the fantastic Joe Caruso. A big fan of Joe and what he does in America, and the value that he brings to franchising. He's put, hey, Nikki Senior, Liam Hobbs, and Harvey Tuck, the Indiana Jones of franchising. I'm going to take that. Absolutely. What a stellar and brilliant panel. Well, thank you, Joe. You've always been great value. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on franchise conflict in, of course, in America, where franchising is heavily regulated, but there's still conflict, of course, you know, and how do you get around that and what happens? Before we've got a couple more people. Let's welcome them. We have Bob Downing here. Great to have you with us, Bob. He's put, hi, everyone. Bob Downing here from FranLift. Well, fantastic to have you with us. And, look, the LinkedIn user has been identified. It's Nicola Hudson. Hi, Nicola. Great to have you with us from Easy Storage. She's put, not sure why it hasn't come through. My name is Nicola Hudson from Easy Storage. Otherwise, fantastic to have you here. And I'm sure you're going to make franchise conflicts look easy to deal with. There you go. It's fantastic. Well, look, we've got a good question coming in from Simon. We're going to put that up. But before we do that, I'd just like to get our take on what conflict is, you know, our experiences of it, as a little opener. So we went Nikki first. Let's go Liam first this time. So Liam, give us an idea of, without going into detail yet, but a little bit of an idea of how you've dealt with conflict in your time as a franchisee and a franchisor.
So it's very different on either side. I suppose I'm lucky or unlucky enough to have dealt with it from both sides of the fence. I think generally as a franchisee, conflict sort of comes where you don't feel as though you're getting what you're paying for necessarily. You're not getting the support that you think the level of support that you think you're entitled to. And from a franchisor point of view, it's normally a case of, the conflict will normally originate from the franchisee side, and it's how that's dealt with, how you sort of take that on board. It's not aimed at you as conflict; it's coming from a genuine place, and I think a lot of the time is how you initially deal with that. I think it can be, it can be squashed at a very early stage, so it doesn't turn into conflict. But inevitably, sometimes, if it's something that you can't give, and the franchisee is demanding that, then yes, it can start to go down. It can start to get a bit fractious and end up in some kind of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting to hear your take as both a franchisee and a franchisor. I imagine that's given you a lot of empathy as to how to do it as right as you can. But look, we can't all be perfect, that's for sure. And conflict doesn't matter how regulated you are. It doesn't matter how well you do it. Right? It's going to happen. It's human nature.
Yeah.
And it's how we deal with it. And as long as we sort of come from, perhaps a point of transparency. It's a word that comes up a lot on this show. If everyone knows what it is they're getting into and knows their responsibilities and expectations, and it's all put down there on the table and supported well, the conflicts can be less. But look, thanks very much for that. Before we get into the comments, let's go to Nikki and get your take and experience on conflicts.
Yeah, it's such a difficult one, isn't it, conflict? Because I don't think anybody goes into franchising as a franchisor or a franchisee with the intention of upsetting anyone or causing any trouble or anything else. I think it very much comes down to mindset and the psychology of the individuals involved and how they engage and interact with each other. I think as well, a lot of people go into franchising because they want to have their own business. As a franchisee, you obviously feel you can do something better than perhaps the employers you've worked with, or you want some more autonomy. And unfortunately, franchising doesn't really provide a huge amount of autonomy. So I think sometimes that can clash with people's values as well. And really, when there's, I think, Liam, you mentioned this as well, like when there's money involved and, things aren't perhaps happening how you anticipated, whether that's the revenue or what you're expecting from your franchisor and what have you, things change perhaps and you didn't feel that the goalposts were set in the right way in the first place. There's so many different ways that you can start to feel resentment and anger, and a lot of people hold on to that to start with because they're being polite and they don't want to share that, and it turns into resentment before it's even communicated. Sometimes it can be really difficult, and I'm very open about the fact that I had a lot of conflict from a small number of people within my network, and it really did have a very bad impact on me personally. So yeah, without going into too much of that, there is a human being on each side of the fence, and I think it's very easy to lose sight of that when you're on one side of the fence. So I don't know if that answers your question enough, but yeah, that's
it really does. I mean, look, this is what we're about. We're trying to get personal experiences of this to see how something feels is really important. Someone once said to me that if someone doesn't remember anything about you, they will remember how you made them feel. Right? So it's a very complex relationship balance, and conflict, like you said, Nikki, can turn into resentment, can turn into anger, can turn into court cases, can turn into all of these different things if it's not dealt with well and hopefully prevented a little bit at the beginning. Look, before we get deeper into this conversation, let's go to the comments. Welcome a few more people that have been that are with us, and also go to a question that Simon has put here. So we've got the lovely Daniel Bull with us. He's put, good evening, everyone from a not so sunny Bournemouth. We've always got a weather report now. I like it. Daniel, I believe, helps franchise businesses grow through social media. So great to have you with us, Daniel, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on conflict and how it affects the wonderful world of franchising. Let's have a look here. We've got the lovely Nick Pleven, one of our fantastic supporters here on the show. He's put good afternoon from a sunny Scotland. It's always fantastic to have you with us, Nick. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Nick is, of course, from etalent and helps our lovely franchise businesses find their lovely people. And look, conflict perhaps comes within people. So it's dealing with people and understanding people's values and where they sit and understanding their behaviors, making sure they're a fit. And perhaps we can get into this with both of you as to perhaps how we choose our franchisees and how our franchisees choose the business they're going to invest in. Because I think if they get it right at the beginning and they're aligned, there's less chance of conflict. What do you make of that? Let's go to Nikki.
Sorry, I was listening to you, but I also saw Simon's comment, which made me laugh. So that's fine. I wasn't laughing at what you were saying. I think the recruitment of... let's put that on for context.
Is this the one? Yeah.
Yes.
Some of the best healthy marriages are based on having a disagreement now and then. That's XY said anyway. Oh, there you go. Well, look, as funny as that is, I mean, Simon's, made a good point that should we avoid conflict or should we embrace conflict? That's perhaps the question there. Anyway, let's attack that question now. Maybe Liam could have a go at that. Do you think that conflict is something we should try and avoid and stop happening, or should we embrace it and have that row, hear it out, and feel better after it?
I think in an ideal world, you would try and avoid it, sort problems out before they get to that scale. We don't live in an ideal world, and as we alluded to earlier, people quite often bottle that up and don't come out with it straight away, and that resentment builds, and then all of a sudden you get a big explosion, and I think then you're in a point where, yes, it's conflict, you can't avoid that, and it's just best to work through that. It's in any conflict, you think you're right, the other person is wrong, and you've got to sort of try and find some middle ground there, and work from there. Sometimes you just can't find that middle ground. So sort of my experience of franchise conflict, there was no middle ground to be found, and it quickly escalated into what was, obviously without going into a lot of detail, but was basically what do we need to do to protect more than loft ladders from this situation, and unfortunately that the only answer to that was to terminate and go through that process. That was quite extreme. I don't think there are that many cases of that. People may prove me wrong, but it's been prepared to negotiate. There are two sides to every story, trying to understand the other person's standpoint, and if you can't go anywhere, then unfortunately you've got to be prepared to go to the other extreme and sort of cut that relationship off, almost like a divorce. If it's not healthy for either party, it's better that you go your separate ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're treating conflict obviously perhaps in a negative way, but look, I think that in some ways there can be a positive route through it, and even if that positive route is for it to be concluded, that might be better for all parties, right? If it can be concluded quickly and fairly neatly. But it's really tricky. What do you make of that, Nikki, in your experience? I mean, I think this is a really, as much as it was an amusing take on it, often franchising is compared in this way. It's a relationship, it's a marriage, these sorts of things, and sometimes that comes to an end, and it's the same with a relationship in a franchise business, isn't it?
Yeah, so interestingly, actually, I used to say I felt like I was trapped in multiple bad marriages at one time, and it was really, really what's the word? It felt very claustrophobic, I would say. I don't think you can fully avoid conflict in franchising, personally, based on what I've seen both in my own network and also in the networks of a lot of the businesses I work with, and a lot of the franchisors I speak to who I don't necessarily work with as well, but, you know, people who I've kind of met since I sold my franchise. Look, I used to sit there thinking I was the only person in the world who was dealing with this, because you go on LinkedIn and everybody else is like, oh, we've been nominated for this award and we've got this new franchisee onboarding. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing something really, really badly wrong here. And I genuinely did feel like I was the only person in that situation. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation today, because there are still lots of franchisors who are sat there probably watching this or may watch this in the future, and who hopefully will see it and go, thank God, it's not just me. I don't think you can avoid it, because I think, you know, whenever there's money involved and, you know, the stakes are high for the individuals who've invested, the stakes are high for the franchisor. They've got to have some controls, but they want to recognize people's independence and autonomy at the same time. That's a very, very difficult line to tread. You've got as well on top of that, you know, I always talk about mindset, of course, but that's the one thing that I recognized from my situation, was that actually we need to understand a bit more about psychology and mindset, because that was the one thing that really helped me through, and that I wish I'd had the knowledge of pre setting up a franchise in the first place, is that everybody comes to the situation with, you know, seeing things through the lens of every past experience, their beliefs, all the things they've grown up knowing to be true. Everybody comes to that conflict with that stuff as well. So you're not just having an argument with the person about the situation, you're both seeing it through the lens of every past conflict you've ever had, and every past challenge you've ever had, every time you were ever made to feel small or you know, worthless and everything else. And so it is very easy to be quite reactive. It's very easy to feel like it's personal. It's, you know, it does take a thick skin, I think, and experience as well, to be able to navigate that conversation with absolutely no emotion whatsoever. You know, and that's, I think, why mediators exist, right? And that's why franchise lawyers exist, because they're needed in that situation. They're not emotionally involved, and so, you know, they can sort of take that step backwards and support people through the process.
Yeah, I mean, look, you made some really interesting points there, and I think one of the things that you said there about what people put out on social media as well, and they put out this story like everything is amazing. And look, we're all guilty of it. It doesn't matter what platform, doesn't matter what we're doing, we try and put out the best, right? But actually some vulnerability is really important, you know, to show some difficulty, some weakness. I mean, you know, Liam puts out stuff, you know, that I see that is vulnerable, that does show different sides of franchising. You know, Ryan Armitage at Teslon, you know, Amrit at Wolfinch, you know, they're all good individuals that show two sides of things. Yes, of course, there's a lot of celebration, and I think it's natural to do that. But it does make it hard. It does make it hard when you just sort of see there's a perception that everyone's doing amazingly well. Look, I want to go to some comments, because we've got some great comments coming in, and I want to make sure that everyone is recognized that's here. So I think we had got to Daniel Bull's comment here. So let's have a look at Leslie. She's put, as long as there are people, there will be conflicts. I don't know if those conflicts are unique to franchising. No, I think this is an interesting one. I don't think they are. I think that conflicts come, you know, it comes from people. You know, people disagree. You know, they have different perspective. Great comment. Let's have a look at this one. Again from Leslie, expectations not being met. This is an interesting one, and Liam, you touched on this as well. You know, and I think it's really important, that transparency, and to understand what your expectations are as a franchisee, and what they are as a franchisor. You know, we've spoken a few times on this show about that balance. You know, about that relationship, that it's not equal. It's you know, it's different. But what do you think about that? About expectations, making sure people are aware of that?
I think you've got to be very open and honest up front. and that works both ways. It's having that frank conversation of, you know, this is what we expect from you, and being open to, you know, hearing and listening to what the, you know, prospective franchisee expects to get out of this at the end of the day, because they've all got different reasons for wanting to buy a franchise. And I think, you know, at that point, if those two conversations align, you've got a good foundation. If it's quite clear that those two, you know, viewpoints are not going to align, then, you know, it's make the brave decision then that, you know, this probably isn't the best relationship to get into. And, you know, you might miss out on a star, but you're probably saving yourself a lot of pain further down.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. We were going to talk about that, these early conversations. Nikki, how important do you think are the early conversations and getting people, you know, with the bridge? Obviously you're talking about supporting, you know, franchisees as they're going on their journey, but how important is it to get aligned at the beginning and make sure you're bringing the right people into your business as a franchise organization?
Yeah, I love that you raised that, Liam. Actually, I think that's really important. You know, we talk about exits quite early now. I think a lot of franchisors talk about the exit process, even in the onboarding process, don't they? You know, you're going to have 5, 10, 15 years, just so you know, this is the process, this is how it would work. I actually think conflict should be discussed at that point too. I think just the basics of, you know, we're not always going to agree. These are the things that will be the rules. This is what you can expect from us in those situations. However, we will always want to listen to you. And if we can make adaptations, then fine. But it's unlikely in these particular areas, for example, brand integrity. And I think letting people know what the process is, how you expect them to communicate in that scenario, and actually, you know, building a foundation for, I can have that conversation. If anyone has, you know, listening, has ever handed their notice in for a job, you know how nervous you get when you go in and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go and tell them I'm leaving and they're going to hate me. And all these horrible scenarios go in your head and people get really nervous. That's, you know, probably accentuated is how a franchisee would feel. So letting them know that this is an okay conversation to have. Look, if you're not happy, if there's things that aren't working for you, it's okay to come and have that conversation with me. First and foremost, gives them the ability and confidence to come and speak to you about it. But secondly, it gives you the opportunity to say, what I won't accept is derogatory comments, you know, abusive behavior or communication to my team, etc. And at that point, we will stop communicating with you and we'll, you know, go straight to the legal team or what have you. However you decide you want to do that in your particular franchise ecosystem, and however that works for you, is kind of setting out those boundaries and the expectations, I think, is really key. And the other thing that was commented on is the value expectation. Sorry, the value alignment. I think that's really important, because understanding a person's values will very quickly tell you how aligned they are with your brand. And Liam, you're right. You know, it's so easy, isn't it, to go, do you know what? I think this person's really good, and to want to go ahead with them because you're excited, but actually they might not be the right person, and you have to know when to say no.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And one thing you said there, let them know that difficult conversations are okay. I really like what you said there. Liam, what do you make of, and I'm going to bring in some more comments from the audience. We've got some fantastic comments coming up from Mara, from Tim, from Nick, from Bob, from Joe. This is a conversation that clearly resonates with our community. If you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show, and today we are talking franchise conflicts with the lovely Nikki Senior and Liam Hobbs. So I'm going to go to you now, Liam, and I'm going to take what Nikki said there, because I really liked it, and I think this resonates with you, certainly in conversations I've had with you in the past. But letting a franchisee know that difficult conversations are okay. I think, you know, that is so important and relevant in franchising. What do you think?
Definitely, because it's, for one, it's best to get that out before it becomes too big an issue. So yeah, we encourage everybody in the network, if they've got something they want to talk about it. You know, there are no conversations that we're not prepared to have. I think conflict can often actually be a healthy thing, because somebody obviously feels passionately about what it is that's bugging them and what's brought them to you. And yeah, you can learn from conflict, and we've changed things in the network. We've changed things that we do from constructive feedback and conflict. So it's not all bad. And sometimes, somebody will come with an idea. On the surface of it, we might not agree with it. We'll want to talk about it more. They get a bit more passionate. And sometimes it's good to have that open, honest, frank, as long as everybody respects each other's boundaries and it doesn't get personal. It's not, people think conflict is always a bad thing. I think there's certainly a lot of good can come from it as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we would much rather have an argument than the franchisee just be sulking and keeping it within
I think that's
himself.
really important. I mean, change or innovation, it rarely comes from a place of comfort, does it? Conflict isn't very comfortable, but it's where ideas come from, challenges, difficulties, conflicts. That's where you're evolving. That's where you're changing and adapting, and that's always going to be good. Yeah. Look, this is such a fantastic conversation, but I want to make sure that we get to all of these comments. I had to put that one up because it made me laugh. Joe's put, P.S. all my comments are more brilliant if you read them aloud with a British accent. Should I ham my British accent up a little bit more? Like a 1950s commentator. Let's have a look. We got one here from Johnny. Johnny, oh blimey, it's a big one. It's almost hiding Nikki there, Johnny. He's put, don't worry, it's just an audit. Well, that was the title of the show when he was on the franchise show, actually. He put, my first goal is to remove the inherent anxiety of the task, to avoid the franchisee's natural fear of conflict in this type of situation. After many years of experience, I have a 90% success rate of calming them down. Yeah, I mean, look, this is really interesting, because an audit definitely sounds scary, doesn't it? That's why we came up with that title for that particular episode. But if you set expectations and if people know what it's about, then they're not going to be as agitated or terrified as they might be. So love it. Let's come to a comment here from Joe Caruso. Joe has put, there's always a natural tension in interdependent franchise relationships. The key isn't avoiding it, but learning to manage it, separating the beneficial friction that drives growth from the pointless distractions that drain energy. Get good at this and the system thrives. Yeah, love it. What do you make of that one? We'll go to Nikki on that. Oh, yeah, Liam, like sorry.
I've just like that. There's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make of that one, Nikki? I think especially those like sort of pointless distractions and niggly little bits, choose your battles, I suppose, if you want to win the war.
Interestingly, we actually talk about the interdependence of the franchise relationship within one of the modules of the bridge. So we have a whole kind of section on that because it's important, right? You end up in this kind of push-pull, and if you don't manage that well, and if you don't recognize people and see them, if people don't feel seen and heard through that process, then that does start to break things, and all these little chips in the armor as you go along are the things that will eventually potentially destroy a relationship with a franchisee. So yeah, absolutely. I think the interdependence of that relationship is a key thing to look at. Like you say though, Joe, not just avoiding conflict, it is about learning how to manage it, but also being able to separate yourself and try and separate it from who you are. I think one of the hardest bits for me with that process was the damage it did to my confidence, and it took me a long time to rebuild that. And again, that's why I wanted to talk about this today, and that's why I do what I do, is because actually confidence from a franchisee's perspective and a franchisor's perspective can get really damaged through the process of dealing with conflict if it's not handled well from either party. And I think it's key to put some onus on the franchisee to manage this well as well. You know, whilst the franchisor is there to manage the system, ultimately there are two people in a conflict, and you need to be able to, you need to know the other person is willing to have a conversation. Liam, you kind of nodded to this earlier when you were saying you had somebody where there wasn't a solution to be found, and I had a couple where that was the case. You know, people didn't want a solution, almost just wanted to argue. So it's about how do you manage that, and it's not easy.
Absolutely. We've got some fantastic comments coming up here, and it's always tricky to keep on top of the conversation, get everybody in here, but we've got some amazing comments. So let's have a look at some. First of all, Mara, welcome to the show. Mara is from Italy, and Mara's put, you think you can consider conflict, especially in franchising, as a misaligned expectation relationship. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely touched on that. You know, that transparency, you know, giving people clear instructions as to what they should expect is so important when it comes to conflict. Really is. Love that one. Look, we've got your colleague coming up here and our good friend, Tim. So let's see what Tim has got to say. He's put, do you think conflict can be avoided to a great extent through the skillful use of communication, understanding areas of human psychology like emotional intelligence? What do you think of that one, Nikki?
I mean, I think Tim knows what I think on that one. That's why we have emotional intelligence in the bridge. So, yeah, I don't think it's just being able to avoid it. I certainly think a lot of conflict can be avoided through the use of that and all the other things we talk about. But I think actually the really powerful part is using things like emotional intelligence and strong communication skills to actually heal relationships once they've got to a certain point. You know, we've had a few people who've gone through the bridge who've come back and said that a franchisee would not communicate with us at all, and now is actually having open and positive conversations because now we've gone and we've understood them a bit more and we've developed our ability to communicate with them in a different way, and actually think about that communication strategy as opposed to going into a conversation thinking, oh, holy cow, what's going to happen today, and being on the defensive. So yeah, 100% I agree with that.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at what Nick's got to say. Nick has put, in my experience, conflicts between people usually arise because of misaligned values. Yeah. You know, we talked about that, didn't we? Getting the values right. I mean, Liam, when you're talking to prospective franchisees, how do you, we talk about this, but it's really hard to align a value, isn't it? It's hard to talk to another human being and decide whether they're right for a business. How do you do that? You know, how do you go about it?
It's difficult. I mean, we're very open about our values. You can see some of them on the wall behind, and we just sort of try and weave those into conversations, and also just asking people, you know, what is it that you want out of this? You know, what makes you tick? Where you're going to get your satisfaction from, gives you a good insight into what their values are, and we're looking for 3 or 4 of our sort of big important core values to us. You know, if somebody shares 3 or 4 of those, then chances are it's going to be a good partnership.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember talking to Ryan of Tesla. Blimey, he's getting a lot of name drops today, Ryan is, but but I do remember talking to him because he said something that really stuck with me, and he'd take a potential franchisee out for dinner, now not to wine and dine them, but to see how they behave with the waiter and the waitress, you know, see if they hold the door open for somebody. And I really liked it because it just shows some common traits that, you know, might really align with who you are. So, yeah, great comment there, Nick. Let's have a look at what Bob's got to say. Bob's put, highly recommend The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lenciotti. I probably mispronounced that. He suggests rather than conflict and disagreement can be healthy, and helps build trust. He makes a clear distinction. Healthy conflict is about ideas, not people. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? You know, conflict is about, I've got this idea, you've got that idea, we're not aligned, but in that is there something better with those two things combined? Yeah, great comment. We've got quite a few more and probably only about 5 minutes to go. So we're going to try and get through all of these. Let's have a look at this one from Joe. Joe has put, often in a high-level multi-unit brand franchising, it is the franchisee having the difficult conversation with their franchisor. They are not amused by this. This is really interesting. I had a multi-site franchisee on last week, 140 units they had. And that balance of power can change. It can change. You know, have either of you had an experience of a franchisee coming to you for that difficult conversation? Perhaps I'll go to Liam on that one. Is it ever started with a franchisee for you?
No, I don't think it has, to be honest. No. Yeah, it's an interesting point.
What about you, Nikki? Is it in your experience, does it normally come from the franchisor, or is it ever from the franchisee, as Joe's described here? Perhaps this is more, you know, in the US, you get a lot more big multi-site, multi-brand operators, don't you?
Yeah, I only had one multi-brand franchisee. I had a couple of multi-sites within my my network. I would say if we're looking at where the conflict comes from, you know, I obviously felt that the conflict came from my franchisees, not all of them. Some of them were fantastic. Actually, even the ones who were driving conflict were still pretty good in a lot of ways. We just had some issues in the relationship. But yes, I would say the conflict came from them, or the difficult conversations were both of us going to the conversation, finding it difficult to have. I don't think there was ever a case where a franchisee came to me thinking the conversation would be difficult, and I went to it thinking, oh, this is going to be super easy and I'm in charge. You know, I think both of us probably went to it and felt that was difficult. I did want to just flick back very quickly, if it's okay, to the values piece, because that's a huge thing, I think. So in my experience, most people don't know their own values. And I think that's why it can become such an issue when a very difficult situation where they've put their life, because often when we feel really unhappy or really stressed, it's because something in our values is not working in alignment with what's happening in real life. So we do this in the bridge, but it's not only about that. It's the fact that we go through and help people to understand what their values are first, their core values, like the things that make up who they are as a human, not the things that they value having around them or aspirational values, but you know, the things that really do make up who they are as a human being. Because especially when you're under a stressful situation, those values are going to come to life. And if what's happening in your business life or your life generally is in conflict with that, it's going to cause a lot of stress and potentially a lot of drama and conflict within that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. We've only got about 2.5 minutes left of this. I mean, this has been an incredible conversation. There are conversations on this show that clearly resonate with an audience. And look, this is one of them. So this is definitely one we're going to be doing again. And what I will say is that all three of us will have a look at these comments after the show and we can respond. The conversation can continue beyond this show because it's really important for it to continue. But let's have a look at a few as we are getting to the last part of today's show. Nick's put, well, Harvey, you can do that by assessing the people when you recruit them. Absolutely. It's whether it's your staff, whether it's your franchisees, get it right at the beginning, or do your best to, and it's going to help you. So get a robust procedure in at the beginning. Mara has put, Bob Downing, most of the times it's more of a search for balance than reaching a balance. I think that was related to a comment earlier, but it's so big we'll have to go back to that one later on, because it would definitely cover Nikki's face if we put that comment up. Bob's put, Mara agreed. So Bob agrees with Mara. Fantastic. Let's have a look at a couple more. Simon's put, it's really important to discuss how to resolve conflict. As a franchise mediator, mediation works so well in resolving disputes, 90% success rate. I mean, look, mediation, Liam, you said there about finding some common ground, whether it's using a mediator, whether it's using a solicitor, or whether it's just sitting down and trying to find that common ground. It's pretty important, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And obviously, try and do that early on, try and get face to face to have those conversations. Sometimes, it might be better to sort of, we've had instances where they might want another franchisee to come in with them, which again, absolutely fine. We're very open to however they want to communicate with us. But yeah, I think you've got to get in the room with them and show that you're prepared to work on this and that you are trying to get a result from a mutually beneficial result from the potential conflict.
Again, Nikki, I mean, we're now talking about trying to resolve a conflict now. It's sometimes the best solution is both parties to walk away. But, how would you sort of summarize trying to get past, resolve and deal with conflicts after our conversation today?
So Tim and I are actually in the process of developing another program which deals with exactly this, about how to resolve when you're in one and how to prepare and prevent them in the first place. And one of the things within that is talking about putting the issue in the middle rather than it being us versus you. It's us versus the problem, and really trying to, and I think it's important to know that, I absolutely support mediation and legal support from that side of things. But before you get to that, if you can, having that conversation and kind of putting the issue as the thing in the middle. So it's us versus the problem, that we're both here wanting to resolve this. We both want to do X, Y, and Z. Let's look at the problem as something that we can both overcome together rather than something that has to be an us versus you sort of scenario. That's one of the techniques that can be really supportive.
So powerful, actually, what you've said there, to take that problem, to take that issue and put that, visually, to put that in the middle, right? So that's not a thing that's being argued back. It's something that both parties are sort of working on. But it takes some of the personal nature out of it, doesn't it? If you make that the thing, the perspective in a conflict or in an argument or in a negotiation is so important. I remember years ago when I was in a sales situation, and there was one person we were selling to, and there were three of us, right? And what I did is I went round and sat next to the person that we were selling to, right? Because it balanced it up. It didn't feel like there were three against one, and these things are really important to give those different perspectives. Look, we have already gone over by about 2.5 minutes for the first section, because this is an amazing conversation with an amazing audience and some amazing guests. But we have come to the last part of the show. Now, this is the part of the show where my screen will go black for a little bit, and I need to go and get another hat, because it's now technically illegal to see me without wearing a hat. And of course, this part of the show is brought to you by PJ Murphy. My hat has got a dent in it. I was trying to sort it out. That just shows you that it's live. Anyway, this part of the show is brought to you by PJ Murphy and Sons, bespoke British hatters. My friend Paul Murphy made me this absolute beauty here. So if you'd like a hat, talk to Paul. Now, this is the part of the show where we're going to stop talking about franchising, stop talking about conflict, and we're going to ask Liam and Nikki a little fun fact about themselves. So we're going to go ladies first. Nikki, you can choose. Have you ever met anyone famous? Have you got a claim to fame? Or have you got some sort of unusual hobby or sport? Something like that.
The only famous person I've really met was Dean Gaffney, Robbie off EastEnders.
Oh,
and I didn't know it was him. So...
Was Wellard the dog with him?
No, he was leading a bar crawl in Gran Canaria. I was 20 and he was walking towards me, and I genuinely thought I must have gone to school with that guy, because I recognised him, obviously grown up with him, So as he walked past, I was like, hey, I've not seen you for ages. And he just sort of walked past, and I was like, rude. And then I realized about 10 minutes later, and I was like, oh yeah, the TV is a one-way system, isn't it? So yeah, it was Dean Gaffney.
Love it, fantastic. And you are going to get a chance to, one of you is going to get a chance to ask me a question. You can get your own back on me, but before we do that, Liam, same to you. Have you met anyone famous? Have you got a claim to fame or something we don't know about Liam Hobbs?
I met Jimmy Savile once, but we probably shouldn't talk too much about that.
No, but look, it was a different time, and when we were kids.
Claim to fame. I don't know, something quite, I suppose more of an interesting fact about me was I was born in a hospital car park because the hospital was on fire at the time.
That's brilliant.
And it probably explains my love for setting fire to things.
Oh, that's fantastic. You have a love for setting fire to things.
Yes.
Fireworks.
Yeah.
So you're a bonfire specialist.
Bonfire, fireworks, log burner at home. I just love. I'm mesmerised by flames.
Me too, actually.
Probably calming when you were a baby, when you were just born.
Definitely.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it takes me back to that safe space.
I love it. Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, I did say you could get your own back on me. You've answered all these questions beautifully today, but either one of you can ask me anything you like. I don't mind, and I don't know what it's going to be, so go for it.
If I can jump in, Nikki, I think if you could have one last guest on the franchise show, who would be your dream guest?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I've got to think carefully when you answer this one.
And it's a really hard one to answer because, and this sounds like a cop-out, but every conversation is amazing. And they're amazing, not necessarily because of the guest, they're amazing because of the conversation. So I think this is the guest. Every single person, the entire audience, every single person that's been in the audience and has been on it, rolled into one. Does that person exist? I don't know, but and I think it's so hard, that question, because this show, I've always said, is about community and the audience first, guest second, me third. So the audience, the community, they're the most powerful thing about what we do here. I started off with nothing written down, and look, I've got all these bits of paper with all these notes because these are amazing conversations. So I love it. But look, thank you, both of you, for your time. It leaves me, first of all, I'd like to thank our fantastic audience because your questions have been incredible. Your support for this is amazing. You are the producers and the directors of this show. So a big thank you to you all. And a huge thank you to our lovely guests, Nikki and Liam. Thank you both for being on the Franchise Show today. And it only leaves me now to say what's happening next week, well, what I think is going to be happening next week. So next week on the Franchise Show, which will be Tuesday, 26th of August, we think we're going to be talking about franchising in the Middle East. So it's going to be a very exciting conversation. I think it's an area that is of interest to lots of people, lots of franchisors. So please join us next Tuesday, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST for that one. And until next time, my friends, take